The loudest man in the room dies first. The real danger is the one who says nothing after the smoke clears, because when the shouting stops, when the fire burns out, and when the world thinks the war is over, that silence isn't peace. That silence is death waiting to move. They say fear keeps men alive. That fear is what makes you cautious, careful, calculated. But what happens when a man no longer fears anything? What happens when life has already taken from him everything that could ever be used against him? That man walks differently, he breathes differently, because nothing can hurt him anymore. A man who has already lost everything fears nothing, and a man with no fear becomes something the world should truly dread. You see, pain can cripple most men, but for some it forges them into iron. When art has been shattered, when trust has been burned, when dreams have been buried 6 feet deep, what remains is not weakness, but a weapon that no blade can dull, no bullet can stop. You can threaten him with death, but he no longer values life the way you do. You can offer him riches, but wealth means nothing to a man who has already buried his soul. You can try to break him, but you cannot break what is already broken. Instead, you will find yourself standing in front of a man who has no chains, no leash, no master. A man who moves without hesitation, because hesitation belongs to those with something left to lose. Every scar he carries, every memory that haunts him, every sleepless night has sharpened his edge. What you call suffering, he calls fuel. What you call despair, he calls freedom. Because when you take everything from a man, you leave behind something far more dangerous than what he ever was before. You leave behind the storm, and storms don't bargain, they don't wait, they don't stop. They consume. So remember this, when you meet a man who carries silence in his eyes, when you see someone who no longer flinches at pain, when you face someone who doesn't care if the sun rises tomorrow, step carefully, because you are not standing in front of a man anymore. You are standing in front of his remains, and remains don't forgive, they don't forget, they destroy. A man who has lost everything has already faced death in 1,000 forms. He has already buried the future, the love, the loyalty that once anchored him. Now he walks unshackled, untamed, unafraid, and when such a man decides to fight, he doesn't fight for victory. He fights because fighting is all that is left. And tell me, how do you stop a man who does not care whether he wins or loses? How do you kill a man who has already been killed 100 times inside his own mind? You can't. That is why the broken are the most feared. Because they move without consequence, they strike without hesitation, and they endure without end, and the more the world underestimates them, the more dangerous they become. When pain strips a man of his weakness, what remains is pure steel. You see, most men live soft lives. They hide behind comfort, behind safety, behind the illusion that tomorrow will always come. But when the fire of suffering burns away those illusions, when lost tears through the soul and leaves nothing but ash, what's left is something harder than stone. Pain is a teacher that never speaks softly. It does not whisper, it roars, and it takes from you everything fragile, everything weak, until you are no longer the man you once were. The boy dies, the dreamer dies, the weak one inside you is buried, and what rises in his place is forged metal. Cold, unbending, merciless. A man who has been through fire does not flinch at sparks. He does not fear wounds, because his body already carries 1,000 of them. He does not fear betrayal, because he has already felt the knife in his back, and he does not fear loss, because loss has already hollowed him out. When pain strips him bare, what remains cannot be broken again, and steel does not bend easily, steel does not bow, steel does not cry, it cuts, it endures, it lasts. So when you look into the eyes of a man who has been emptied by suffering, when you see the stillness in him, the silence in him, do not mistake it for peace. It is not peace. It is the calm of a blade before it strikes. It is the stillness of steel waiting to be unleashed. Weakness dies in the fire. Fear dies in the fire. Hesitation dies in the fire. but the man who walks out of it. He is not the same man who walked in. He is sharper, stronger, deadlier, and when he moves, he does not move like flesh and blood anymore. He moves like a weapon. So understand this: pain is not the end. Pain is the forge, and what it leaves behind is not a victim, but something the world should be afraid of, because pure steel does not ask for mercy. Pure steel does not break under pressure. Pure steel cuts through anything that stands in its way, and the man who has been reduced to steel, he does not stop. He does not surrender. He does not forgive. He endures. He fights. He becomes unstoppable. A broken man has no chains. He walks free of consequence. Most men live their lives bound by fear of losing, bound by the weight of expectations, bound by the rules of society, by the opinions of others, by the fragile idea that they still have something left to protect. But when a man is broken, when life tears everything away from him, family, loyalty, love, hope, those chains snap, and what walks out of that wreckage is no longer tied to anything the world values. That man cannot be threatened. You cannot cage him with fear, because fear has already sat at his table and eaten everything he had. You cannot bribe him, because what could gold mean to a man who has already buried his soul? You cannot shame him, because he no longer bows to the judgment of others. He is free, not the kind of freedom the world dreams about, the dangerous kind, the kind that comes from having nothing left to lose, and that is why he is feared. Because consequence is what keeps ordinary men obedient. Consequence is what makes them hesitate, what makes them compromise, what makes them weak. But the broken man, he does not hesitate, he does not compromise, he does not bow. He moves like a shadow in the night, like a fire that refuses to be contained, because nothing binds him anymore. He carries silence in his eyes, and in that silence there is power, a silence that says, "Do your worst. I have already endured it." He does not wait for justice. He does not wait for mercy. He takes what is left before him and carves his own path through it. And here's the truth: freedom without consequence makes him unpredictable. You never know what he will do, because he himself no longer cares. He can burn it all down and walk away without flinching. He can cut ties, sever bonds, erase names, and never look back. That's the danger of a man who is already broken. You cannot control him. You cannot threaten him. You cannot stop him. A broken man is not weighed down by tomorrow, because tomorrow does not exist to him. He does not cling to yesterday, because yesterday is already ashes. He moves only in the now, with no fear of what comes after, and no regret of what came before. That is why his steps are heavier than soldiers. That is why his presence chills the room. That is why even kings fear the man who has been shattered, because they know his chains are gone, and theirs still bind them. So when you see him, silent, scarred, unshaken, do not mistake his calm for surrender. He is not defeated. He is free, and freedom, real freedom born from ruin, is the sharpest weapon of all. A broken man has no chains. He walks free of consequence, and the world is not ready for what such a man can do. Wounds become weapons when carried long enough. At first, pain weakens a man. It drags him to his knees, makes him bleed, makes him doubt if he can stand again. Most men stop there. They hide their scars. They bury their hurt. They try to forget. But the ones who don't, the ones who learn to live with the wound, to breathe with it, to walk with it, they change, because a wound that doesn't heal doesn't stay a weakness forever. Over time, it hardens, it sharpens. It becomes armor on the outside, fire on the inside, and the man who carries it long enough learns to turn it into a blade. Every betrayal becomes a lesson. Every scar becomes a reminder. Every night of suffering becomes another stone sharpening his edge, and slowly the wound no longer slows him down. It drives him. It fuels every step, every fight, every word he speaks. A man who carries wounds long enough stops fearing them. He stops hiding them. He starts using them. That pain you tried to bury him with, it becomes the reason he stands taller. That loss you thought would destroy him, it becomes the fire that keeps him moving when everyone else quits. That scar across his soul, it becomes the proof that he can survive anything you throw at him. And here's the truth. You can't defeat a man who has turned his wounds into weapons, because every strike against him only makes him stronger. Every cut only forges another blade. Every attempt to break him only sharpens his resolve. Wounds are not weakness. They are proof. Proof that he has been through war and still breathes. Proof that he has faced death and chosen to walk away. Proof that he has carried pain long enough to turn it into something deadly. So when you face a man full of wounds, do not think he is fragile. Do not think he is broken. He is not carrying pain as a burden anymore. He is carrying it as an arsenal, and every scar on his body, every mark on his soul, every memory etched in his mind, is a weapon pointed directly at the world. Wounds become weapons when carried long enough, and the man who carries them does not stop, does not forgive, does not fall. He strikes again and again and again, because wounds once turned into weapons never dull. The most dangerous silence is the one that comes after destruction. Noise is easy to understand. Screams, gunfire, chaos, flames rising into the sky, and fear that because they can see it, they can hear it, they can name it. But silence, silence after it all burns down, that is where true danger lies, because silence means nothing is left to lose. Silence means the storm has already passed, and what remains is a man who stood in its center and survived. You don't hear rage in his voice anymore. You don't see panic in his movements. You see stillness, cold, empty, waiting. That silence is not weakness. It is calculation. It is the quiet before the blade moves. Destruction changes a man. It rips apart everything he once protected, tears down the walls that gave him comfort, leaves him with nothing but scars and memory. And when the world expects him to crumble, he doesn't. He just grows quiet. That's the danger. You cannot read him anymore. You cannot predict him. He speaks less, but he means more. Every step is heavier, every look sharper, every breath laced with the weight of 1,000 fires that already consumed him. And you standing in front of him, you wonder if he is finished. You wonder if his war has ended, but it hasn't. It has only shifted into something colder, something deadlier, because silence is not surrender. Silence is patience. Silence is the sharpening of steel in the dark. When a man stops shouting, stops begging, stops raging, it is not because he is broken. It is because he has accepted what he is. It is because destruction has already carved him into something that doesn't need to make noise to be feared. And here's the truth. Noise dies quickly. Battles end, fire fades, screams vanish into the air, but silence lingers. Silence stays in the room. Silence follows you, haunts you, weighs on your chest. That's why the silence after destruction is the most dangerous of all. Because it tells you that the man standing there has nothing left to say and everything left to do. He will not warn you. He will not announce his move. He will not give you the chance. Prepare. His silence is the signal, the only one you will get. The most dangerous silence is the one that comes after destruction, because by then it's already too late.